Hello, and welcome to The Storyteller's Mission with Zena, a podcast for artists and storytellers about changing the world for the better through story. Well, today is going to be a special episode because we're not actually officially back for season 3 of this podcast. That happens in another week or so. However, I couldn't wait that long to bring on my guests that I want to introduce you to today. Times are urgent because voting happens next week. And for people that live in the LA area that happen to be able to vote for this particular candidate in this particular district, I wanted to have an opportunity for you to know him. Because what I have discovered is the fact that I got to meet Siaka has really made a difference to me in terms of my involvement with the current political culture and climate that's happening in Southern California, but also in the culture in general. And it's also given me some hope. So I think it's important that we know who to vote for. If we don't know who to vote for, what are we supposed to do? It makes us feel very powerless and helpless. So that's the reason why I am departing from the normal structure of this show. Now, this is still a show dedicated to teaching storytellers how to write excellent stories that impact culture. But the truth is, it's time for us to bridge the gap between disciplines and become citizens that are actively involved as well. We cannot separate these things any longer. In any case, I just wanted to take a moment to say hello. And thank you for watching this very special episode of The Storyteller's Mission. And tune in again soon for the official season 3 launch of this podcast. All right, without further ado, let's get started. This is Siaka Massaquoi.
Yes.
And I have not known Siaka for very long, but we're going to introduce him to you because it's really important right now that we have an idea of who to vote for when we go into the coming election.
Yes, yes.
And just briefly, what I want to say is the reason this is on my heart is because I realized something. Until I met Siaka, I was really discouraged. I was really discouraged because I didn't have a candidate that I truly believed in, that I personally knew, somebody that I could actually believe could make a difference. It just seemed so dark and bleak. And I didn't even realize this until upon reflection. But the minute I met Siaka, some of that blackness disappeared because now I had a face to hope. Isn't that something?
Yeah, thank you, Zena. Thank you for having me here. Just, whew, man. And for a lot of people who don't know, actually, Zena and I met. She was the last house that my fiance and two other friends we were canvassing in the neighborhood. And she was the last house that we stopped at. And Zena just like lit up and was just on fire for just what we were talking about. And when it comes down to the election and where we see our country right now. And I think it resonated with you like it's doing a lot of people because...
That's my dog.
Yeah, that's the puppy. But it resonated with you like it does a lot of people and like myself because we're seeing how bad it's getting.
Yeah.
And we don't want it to go further than what we can even imagine because we're Americans. We have no idea at the end of the day, most of us, right? Unless you were born in another country or your parents have been telling you stories ever since you're a kid. Most generational Americans have no idea about this.
Yeah.
And we're over so this idea of a moral high ground. We're voting away our rights that was established in this country and our safety more than anything else. So me wanting to get involved was just getting involved in rallies and the recall and more rallies, and then to hit a point where it's like this position's opening up here in District Assembly 43. My opponent is Luz Rivas. Check me out on siaka4assembly.com. But no one was running against her. Then I'm looking on the list, and Assembly, a lot of people don't even know, those are the people that write our laws here in California. Those are the people that now have passed the law that say in SB 1419, the parents need their kids' permission to see their health records. Those are the same people that signed into law SB 2098, which doesn't allow a doctor to deviate from what the state says medicine is. He can't have any of his or her own ideas. He has to follow the state. Those are the same people that now make it okay for a baby to lose its life 28 days after birth and no questions need to be asked. That's the laws that we're under right now. And when we look at just the legislative side, it's like, the sad truth is, as a populace, as educated we think we are because we get like Apple News or we're watching our Instagram or our Twitter feed, most of us are civically ignorant, and we're looking at the district, and I want to say it was probably about 75 to 80% of legislators just here in California were running unopposed. There's so many people, so many positions are running unopposed, and it's only one side in there because from something as minimal as me just wanting to go, you know what, I just don't want to give her a free win. That's it.
So Siaka is running for District Assembly 43. That's the position. I met him randomly because he was canvassing on my street. The minute I met him and he started presenting his views, it was so encouraging to me because they match my own. He's a conservative, a Republican, he is a Christian, and he has the same worldview as I do. Now, you might be asking, well, this is politics. What are you doing, Zena? We come to your podcast because you talk about story. And that's true. I do talk about story. But guess what? We are getting to a point where we can't separate things out anymore. We just can't. There is too much overlap. And our storytelling ability is being hindered, it's being hampered, it's being prevented. Our narratives are being prevented from even getting out because of the laws being passed in this country. So it can't be separated anymore. And in fact, one of the things that Siaka and I have been talking about, and that he has really, I think, helped me to even become, is bolder, more outspoken in more areas, even if I feel ill-equipped, because that's where we're at in this country. We cannot hide any longer.
I think it's even more important for the artists, and I watched it. I don't think it's too off that you're getting involved. I don't think, even though I didn't go to school for this, or my life's been in Hollywood for 15 plus years, it's like, as a storyteller and an artist, and we think outside the box, this is also a kind of a natural move for us. But now we're here in Los Angeles, California, and they're telling you they're writing stories, and then they're telling you, don't tell stories. Tell what we tell you to say. And you're seeing how Hollywood right now, from that storyteller standpoint, when's the last Top Gun Maverick right now is the last big blockbuster, and before that, you couldn't tell me outside of Endgame, which was a comic book movie. We're not telling good stories because it's ideologically driven. And when you said, about being bold, I believe that. As I'm also a Christian. I really want that to be out there because I believe God saved my butt when I was in a hopeless state.
Yeah.
And the promise is you're free now. You're free of fear. And so when we talk about this freedom that we want to have in the founding of our country, it's not supposed to be separate. That's the biggest lie we've ever been told. We're supposed to have our values and our politics hand in hand.
That's right.
The founding fathers said this Constitution is for moral people. If they don't have it, they will lose it. That everyone who runs for local office, their threat wasn't the people will come get you. The threat is they need to take oath because the higher power will come get them. Mm-hmm. These are godly men. And back in 1947, whereas Hugo Black started the lie, separation of church and state. The rule is the state cannot decide what the national church is supposed to be. That's the separation of church and state. It's not a separation of church to state.
That's right. So that's actually from, it's not from the Federalist Papers that some people think, the whole Thomas Jefferson thing. It was a private thing that he had said because somebody was worried that he was worried about the other thing. He was worried not that he didn't want the church to stay out of the government. He wanted the government to stay out of the church.
Exactly.
And then that was twisted and made as a separation of church and state. But the truth is, Christians that are touting that or following that doctrine these days, they're wrong.
Not only are they wrong, let's look at the last 50 years of our lives. The church and Christians have advocated entertainment, they advocated higher education. Because Harvard, Yale, Brown, all those schools were founded on Christian. They were Christian schools. Hollywood founded to tell the gospel. That we turn our back on politics, turn our back in the schools, like I would say higher education, but also lower education. Let's look at those. Can we say like, hey, these places are an environment to actually encourage positive growth, or have these places become kind of dark centers?
Yeah, what I think you're saying is when Christians leave a particular discipline or area, then bad things happen. It just does. It deteriorates.
And we get into this place of all, and I've watched it, and I grew up secular. I grew up, liberal and super left leaning over on North Shore of Chicago. And I watch wondering, why did they fight more? They sit back and they just kind of let it happen. Why did they let them take things away from them? Well, that's because they're weak. I used to think this. That's because they're weak. Oh, well, we're winning. So the perception, a lot of Christians, you guys watching, don't think that you're doing the right thing because the other side is going, you guys are just scared. Screw them then. Because that's what my friends thought.
And what's interesting, I just recently listened to a podcast with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I love Charlie Kirk.
And one of the things that he says on that is that he really thought that the church was going to fight when the mandates were issued over COVID, especially when the church was put into the category of non-essential, and yet strip clubs were open, pot house places, liquor stores, all that. But the church was closed because it was non-essential, and pastors didn't fight. Why didn't pastors fight, Siaka?
Well, a lot of them didn't because, again, I believe that I've watched Christians advocate their position in this country. This country was founded under Christianity. The Bible is referenced 39 times in the Constitution. And yet they don't remember this about this is why we're here. The Revolutionary War was started by pastors going, yo, they're coming, let's go. 300 by the fourth pastor that got the congregation together, 3,000. So this whole country has been founded. It's in our DNA. Pastors have turned their back to it. Pastors also, and I listened to Bodhi Bakum, for example. I don't know if you know him. Great pastor, and he talks about, look, I just preach the gospel. I'm not here to appease, society. I'm just here to spread the news. I'm the mailman. And so I think churches and a lot of pastors have forgotten. It doesn't matter if they say LGBT, XYZ. It doesn't matter if they say, somebody's a girl now who was a boy and vice versa. It doesn't matter. What does the gospel say? That's your charge as a teacher, as a shepherd. Your charge isn't to be like, well, it's raining outside, we're done. Don't worry about that. You're supposed to get the sheep to where they're supposed to go, period, regardless if it's shiny out, raining, or snow.
But see, I can hear in that a justification for not talking politics then. I don't talk politics. I just talk the gospel.
Well, the gospel tells you how we're supposed to move. If you agree that you go, I don't get involved in politics, so I won't vote on issues as important as abortion. Those are babies dying. God said it'd be better, Jesus said it'd be better for them to put a millstone around their neck than harm one hair on their head. So you can say I'm not into politics. What does that statement say to you about children and babies being hurt? That's not politics.
What about the person that says to you, yeah, but Jesus didn't come to overthrow Rome. He stayed out of government.
Well, it wasn't about Rome. It was about the individuals. Right? So it's up to us. And that's the other part that's in the Constitution. It says the government will work as well as the people do. If the people choose not to work because they say their faith, they're disappointed. To me, they're disappointing God because they're not being active in their community, fellowship. And then they're disappointed in the foundations of this country, which is we the people, not we the handful that go to Harvard and then they relate it to Nancy Pelosi and then you can. No, it doesn't say that. It says we the people. So if the people don't, the people are to blame.
Well, and you're making a great point because the truth is, in America, it's different than Rome. I mean, America is special.
Yes.
America is a government for the people, by the people, which means we have a power to vote out representatives that don't actually represent us.
Exactly.
And we also have a duty. It's built into the structure of America that we have a moral duty to get involved in government.
And I would want to ask Christians this: when you sit there and you want to separate your faith from politics. Okay, in your own home, how do you raise your kids? You're the first governing body for your children to have an example of. And then should they separate faith from listening to your law, or how's that work?
Well, and that's the point, is that it's impossible to tear those apart. I mean, the whole point, I think, of our lives is integration. Mm-hmm. You can't separate your Christian beliefs from business, how you do business. You can't separate your Christian beliefs.
It's in there, actually. You're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to. That's right.
It's what tells you how you.
Everything that you do, you should do as unto the Lord, and with the same moral compass. One of the things that I have in common with Siaka is we both have backgrounds in recovery. So there's a bond there because we can speak recovery language. And we both agree that there's a lot of really good principles, Christian principles in recovery that ought to be applied to the real world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Would you share a little of your testimony with my audience?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I was a hopeless drunk. I was a hopeless drunk. And for me, it didn't really start, I was fine in high school. I was raised by a single mom. I was raised in a great environment, right? In a sense, it was safe. So I wasn't worried about a safety thing. It wasn't like looking over my shoulder every day or anything. And it wasn't until I got to college and a lot of fear, as I look back now, fear took over me of wanting to be, accepted, of course, like a lot of people do, wanting to be liked. And I was fortunate enough to play college football at the University of Iowa. And I didn't have a solid foundation. And that's when a lot of the darkness had come in, a lot of alcohol, a little weed every once in a while, but that wasn't my thing. It was alcohol and women. Because it was just there. It was just, here you go, right? And so that started to become, when I wasn't doing good in school and I wasn't exceeding in football like I wanted to, then that started to become my outlet of achievement, if you will. How much can I drink, or how many different women can I hook up with, right? And so I took that into the real world. In 2004, I moved out here, and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still drinking a half a bottle of whiskey just to go to sleep at night. And now I'm here in the fast pace of LA and Hollywood, and working at a bar and going to auditions in the morning and partying with other actors. And, it just kept getting worse and worse in our relationships. Got 3 DUIs, crashed cars, was woken up. I remember one part, a lot of people think this would be the worst time, and it wasn't. I had passed out in front of a dumpster. And this couple, hey, you okay? Woke me up. And I woke up and I looked at them, and they were just a regular couple, and they could tell I just was dressed, wasn't dressed like I lived on the street, and I had a backpack, and they could tell I was just a normal person in that sense of the word. I didn't live in the street. And I was like, oh yeah, fine. I got up and took off. And I've always thought about that, of how something's wrong. I'm not supposed to be in this place. It was something I always felt, but I couldn't help it. I just couldn't stop. Siaka couldn't stop. I've tried so hard. I was like, well, just wine. Maybe just shots before I go out. Maybe just beer. Only beer and wine from now on. Oh, maybe a shot of whiskey. I always come up with the different ways to just hold on. And the first time was in 2013. I was living in this artist housing, which is pretty much a slumlord area in Koreatown. Had 14 people living in the house, but I was the cool guy because I had the biggest room, so I was fine. Everyone else could shack up together, but I had the biggest room. We literally had a couple that were crackheads in the one room and a couple that were meth heads in the other. And one night I came home drunk, and there was ramen noodles on the stove, and I was like, well, I'm hungry, so I ate it. And as I'm eating, the meth head couple, the guy comes out, he's screaming at me for stealing his food, which I did. I stole his food. I didn't ask him, I just took it. And I get all in my feels because he's yelling at me. How dare you yell at me? You know what I mean? That's the insanity of the disease. How dare you yell at me for stealing your thing? I'm just that's
right.
And so I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and one of the other guys who, he has his own issues, pulled me aside and was like, Siaka, we talked about it and said, if you come home drunk again, we're going to ask the landlord to kick you out. And I'm like, you got meth heads over there always screaming at each other, fist fighting each other. You got crackheads over there doing the same. You're down in the basement when we're not supposed to have basements in Southern California. What? And it really just hit me like, wow.
I'm the one they want to kick out.
Yeah. I was like, this was a different
How
level of
bad
rock
is it?
bottom. Even in jail, it wasn't rock bottom. It was weird, you know? And I'm like, something different has to happen. It has to change. And, you know, there's just two friends that also came there. They were visiting from Copenhagen. And Lars and Nikki. And I was talking to them. They're a sweet couple. And Ricky asked me, she goes, you ever think you're an alcoholic? And for a decade at this point, I'd never wanted to relate to that because alcoholics are losers. As I sit here now and I've had moments of like clarity that feels like a weight's been lifted, but in that moment, I couldn't fight it anymore when she asked me. And it was like, yes. And it felt like it finally just came out of my throat and left. And everything opened up in that moment. Because then Lars asked, he goes, you ever think about going to AA? I was like, yep, let's go. It went from hesitation to even wanting to admit to once the admission came out.
Embracing a path of change, just hoping it was going to work.
Just something. And so we went the next day, or we went that night actually. And then I started going 90 and 90 as you know, what we try to do. And I was good for 19 months, but my ego was still strong in there. And I thought I graduated. And I was dating this girl, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. Mind you, it was probably like 2 weeks. So I was already starting to think that. I had money in my pocket, like I was making money. I bought a car with cash. I was feeling good. I was living in a better part. I was out of that crackhead house, living in a nice spot in the valley. I'm like, I got it. We're having a date at a park. I tried to be romantic, and I bought this bottle of wine that she didn't get on our first date, but she thought about. So I got that bottle of wine for us. And I poured her a glass, and I poured myself a glass, and she's like, yeah. Yep. And I go, well, I never said I would never drink again. I just said I wouldn't drink now. I'm like, we're good. A week later, we had broken up.
Wow.
And I'm drinking a half a bottle of whiskey, gonna go to sleep.
That
19 months, gone in a week. And it's still, and in a sense, it still took what it took before I stopped drinking to get back to that space of like that thing, right, that you were always dragging, you're chasing, right? Took me right back on it again, another half bottle of whiskey. And you know, I always say this, you know, it's harder when you go out because you can have a stomach full of booze, but a head full of AA is not as fun.
No.
But I looked at it more, not that, I looked at it more of, it was definitely God's grace, because luckily I was only out for 5 months, and I was working a job for Crescent ROB doing conventions, and I made a fool of myself in things that in the past would have cost me my job. My roommate, who we always room together on when we travel, good guy, pulled me aside. One of the heads of our department pulled me aside. And the owners of the company, husband and wife team, Christian conservatives, who I found out were Trump supported at the time. Like I used to debate the wife. They called me a couple days after our event. And the one theme that I kept hearing, which I couldn't hear before, right? The first time before I first went in, because it was always bad luck that got me before. But this time around, they all said, we're only saying this because we love you. And, you know, I in what I learned in the room, even those 19 months, was like, I gotta let people love me. And in doing so, if someone's saying I love you, then I gotta consider their words. Where before I used to go, well, you don't get it. It was just because if I didn't leave that party, it would have been fine. If I didn't show up here, it would have been fine. If I didn't not, you're saying this because you're concerned. You care. And I'm like, if I say I care about you, why won't I let you care about me? Why won't I hear you care about me? And to me, that's why I think that was God's grace, because my ears were finally open to that. And then I could look back and wow, people were saying this. My best friend I've known since I was 17 was saying this forever. And so went back in the room. My acting mentor, the first guy I ever took an acting class from when I was going to become an actor back in Iowa, was in the room. And this girl I met at a party back in December who was like, I was trying to get her to drink. She was like, oh no, I don't drink, I'm good. She's there. And I was just like, of course,
Of course,
like,
yeah.
thank you, God. All right, you made it. You go. This is where I'm supposed to be, and from then on, like I
Never
was
looked
in.
back.
Yeah, I can't look back. And the beautiful thing about it, we talked about it earlier about be careful what you ask God for, especially if you want Him to work on something for you, because I don't worry about alcohol like that anymore. I remember because I have like friends around, or I know I've been through stuff because I'm alive still, right? But I remember those things. I just can't imagine myself being that anymore because of just where we are, and that's the testimony I believe. And the biggest grace that God has shown me, one of them, because He saved my butt many times, so I can't say that. It hit me last March when I called my mom, because I like to call people who have always been there for me on my sobriety date. In March of this year, she goes, I was telling her, I was like, yeah, today is 7 years, and she was like, really? I'm like, yeah, Mom. She's like, wow. It's like, I forgot how long, and I'm like, you forgot, like. Think about all the times I disappointed her and she forgot.
Because she's so used to the new you. She's just so, she doesn't worry about you. She's all that strife you put her through. And she got freedom too. We talk about addiction and trauma stuff on the show a lot, because that's one area I get. And you're touching on a couple of things that I think are really important for us as human beings, and one of it is the enslavement. I mean, boy, I tell you, addiction is the best example of what the Bible talks about when He says we are slaves to sin. Because even though we want to be free, we cannot. We are enslaved. And that is just a terrible place. So then a person who is in recovery, who has been delivered of that enslavement, oh my goodness, it is a daily reprieve.
It's a daily reprieve, and at the same time, if you can, and this is why for me, I believe that, like, and this is just me, I do believe that the 12 steps can get you closer to God.
Me too.
But, like, you should get in the Bible.
Right,
because,
me too.
Like, once you're able to, I feel like that is a stepping stone to that truth, to that ultimate freedom.
And one of the things that I hadn't said yet, but I think is really true in your story, like that whole thing of not being able to hear other people's love for you, right? Like, I think that's really a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a real problem that we don't know how to receive it. And a lot of times when we're in addiction, or if we have any sort of trauma from the past, there is a core belief that says that we are fundamentally unlovable. So when somebody tells you that they love you, we just don't believe them.
Yeah. No.
And so then what the 12-step program, I think, part of my journey in that has been, is I used to believe that God tolerated me.
Wow.
But He didn't really love me. Like, He loved me because He had to, because He's God, but not that I was actually lovable. There's a difference. Yep. There's a difference between loving a person because you're choosing to love them and they're barely tolerable, and loving a person because they're delightful and you love them. You can't help it. I never categorized myself in the second. I always thought that if God loved me, it was because of His goodness, not because of anything delightful in me. So part of my 12-step journey, and I'd been a Christian my whole life, I mean, since elementary school, and I had lots of training. I knew scripture. I was a leader in the church. I had gotten my master's in apologetics. I had been in Bible studies. I mean, so I knew God. I'd memorized a lot of verses. I'd always been involved in the church. And yet I didn't realize how deep that core belief went. I mean, I wouldn't have even really been able to articulate that was the core belief, but it was.
That's curious, because, like, to me, as somebody who's, like, just kind of getting into the Bible and everything now, I'm like, I know He loves me. And I think, like we were talking about, in recovery, I've seen Him.
It's because it was pre-recovery. So pre-recovery, and, I actually gave a talk about this at one of the speaking engagements, that Christianity does not trump humanity. We actually have to go through our humanity to understand Christianity. And so until the trauma of my past was able to be addressed, see, it was going into the muck and the mire that allowed me to see the core beliefs, the false beliefs about God that I held, that prevented me from experiencing his love and grace, because I believed and I was right. I mean, I knew I was bad. I knew I was sinful, but I knew it in the wrong way. I knew the depravity without knowing the dignity. And so I just agreed with him that I was a piece of crap and that nobody would love me because there was nothing lovable about me. And it was only until I got into the humanity or the recovery program that I was able to experience God from really a 12-step standpoint, which helps you to what's the first step? Admit that we have a problem. We are powerless. We cannot do this. And number 2, and that there is a higher power who is able to bring us back from insanity. And that was the key. Like, I knew I was insane, but the idea of coming back from insanity, and I couldn't get there. I couldn't get there. God had to get there. And that it really was a dependence on God and a relationship that I could build with God in my brokenness, where I wasn't trying to perform. It was all of my sins were known. They were all splayed out for everyone to see.
Yeah, you're done.
That's hitting bottom. There was no hiddenness anymore. But the best thing God ever did for me was destroy me or allow me to be totally exposed. And there was no hiding anymore. And that meant there were no idols to hide behind.
Yes, which was alcohol for me, right? It was the pain. It's interesting how that works when you break through and you can feel that freedom.
Yes, this is where I really think it comes down to, which is what I've been saying from the beginning of this podcast. We have to tell the truth.
Yes.
And one of the huge problems in the church is that when you are caught in addiction or some sort of sin that has ensnared you, the pressure to hide is so great, because guess what? The church is the best at killing its own wounded. I mean, they will destroy you. And guess what? They have. I mean, almost all of the Christians in my life shunned me in my brokenness and repentance. When I was finally exposed and I was repentant and I was beyond myself, they didn't respond with love and let's step up beside you. They responded with, yep, you're bad.
Yeah. You know, it's funny about that, because at least, again, I look at it and I think it comes a little different, because I feel like some Christians, as I watch, can get comfortable in it. They know certain things they can, prayers they can say and how to move here and move there. But like, to see someone in a broken state, in my belief, that's when you put on your workman glove and go, all right, let's get to work. It's time to show what this gospel's about. It's time to show why it works.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to have you on the show, even though I don't typically do this is my very first official guest on the Storyteller's Mission. So everybody who listens to the show knows that this is really rare, which means it's very important to me. And it's important to me because elections are coming up. And I feel that I have been called by God to get more actively involved in the political process, even though I've always avoided politics. However, because I know you, because I know what you stand for, and because I believe you can actually make a real difference. And I think this guy's going to go all the way. I just do. I do. I have this feeling. But even if that didn't happen, you're going to go to the Assembly District Assembly 43.
43, there you go.
But it's really important for us to get out and vote. We've got to get involved, even if it's just voting. And I wanted you to speak to the audience about what it means, in your opinion, to, as a Christian, be brave and courageous during these days that we're living out right now.
First of all, I thank you for bringing that up, because, and I don't have the bracelet anymore, but that couple I told you about, that husband and wife that work for Crest Oral B, and they're owners of the company. So they sent me 5 years in of my recovery, they sent me a bracelet that had my sobriety date on it, but had on the back Joshua 1:9. For did I not say to be bold and courageous, because I am your Lord your God and I'll always be with you. I mean, that's not verbatim, but it's in there. And so as a Christian, the reason why in this time is because that's part of the edict in order to love God with everything. So we have to be bold and courageous. We have, that is the call. That's the call. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, being a former athlete, or being an athlete, I'm not a former, you still got skills. But being an athlete, being on stage, being on film, when a director's like this, you go, okay. And if you've done it enough, you understand, just take the direction. Mm-hmm. So if Christians would just let go of how they feel about it, just take the direction to be bold and courageous, then there you go. Mm. Those things will just sit in there. And I think, like I said, I feel it's really important. And I think you're 100% right. We have to, the time is now because of the directions we see where we're going. But it's easy to be bold and courageous, especially now because we're called to be bold and courageous. Mm-hmm. It's hard to follow through because of our whole, what is she going to think? What is he going to think? Am I going to lose my job? And I get it. I watch people leave the state. I watch people lose their job. I watch people return to their job because they're like, what am I going to do? I watch a 24-year-old say, well, I won't get the jab, but I'll at least stick it in my nose. And now she has deviated septum in there at 24 years old just because she wanted to work as an actor. So I watched people compromise that thing because they weren't courageous or bold in trusting God in that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's easy to do in the sense of that's the directive. It's easy to know the directive. It's hard to follow through on it. But why is it an issue to follow through? Where's the trust? Where's that faith? And
it doesn't mean that you're not going to get fired.
It doesn't mean any of that stuff. Or that means no one says be bold and courageous and everything will work out perfectly.
That's right. No.
It's just a call for it. But like you said, how do we separate politics from our faith when it goes, well, Prop 1 says up to birth.
Yeah.
How do you separate that? How do you, if you have a family, if you're godsons, you look at them and go, yeah, if your mom wanted to up to birth, you shouldn't exist anymore if she wanted to. And yes, California should codify that into law. Yeah. How do Christians? No. And then you go, well, it's abortion over here. If you jump in there, you have to then look at everything else because this is the weakest among us, our babies. So you're not going to get involved when it's talking about taxes. You're not going to get involved when it talks about where the money for school goes to. It's not going to get involved when it talks about the Black Lives Matter issues or whatever. But if you want to get involved in the abortion issue with babies, you have to get involved with everything else because your faith tells you that's wrong. Your faith tells you Marxist ideology is wrong. Your faith tells you taxation without representation is wrong. Mm-hmm. This is what your faith tells you. The Second Amendment is there for you to protect yourself because to protect yourself is your own godly right.
That's right.
So how do you separate it?
You can't.
Outside of just a statement of, well, we should separate. How? Now I want to know, moving
now
forward.
Show me. How does that work?
Because as I saw that separation, how do you sleep at night with that separation? Because well, I can't speak on that, so I'll back away. To know you're not doing enough for your community.
And that's where the fear and the courage comes in, because the truth of the matter is, it is scary.
It is scary.
And most of us feel even ill-equipped. I feel ill-equipped to be able to speak on these things. And I feel so I recently posted an article on LinkedIn that my brother from Germany reached out and said, Zena, I would take that down. Wow. You look like, they look at these things, employers and that sort of thing, and they won't want to hire you. It makes you look difficult. And I had to, this is a family member, it's somebody I adore and I love and trust and all those things. And I had to think, okay, what is the right response here? Because I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm not trying to get into fights, but I also can't not say stuff. That's in my nature. And I think we think as Christians that we're supposed to be peacemakers.
No. What? Jesus didn't say that. I mean, honestly, that's why I love it. And like Charlotte was saying the other day, actually, it's like, we're like the new punk rock and this, that, and the other. I'm like, yeah, it says it in there. It came to separate mothers from daughters.
But it also says, if you have all these things but have not love, you are a sounding gong. You are a banging cymbal.
But he knew the radical ideas of being outside of this world and not clinging to the world. We see with the COVID stuff. That was all world. And look how they reacted to us to go, yeah, I ain't buying it. How can you, grandma, and the kids, and your job? And you want to
That's right, yeah.
They all the stuff to offer you of the world.
It's terrible. But this also becomes the thing where I think we can be confused, where, it says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. But I think sometimes we hear that and we go, okay, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, so separate from the world. But that's not what it's saying. Speak on that.
No, it's not saying separate from the world, because this is the only place we are. We have to show how we're Christians. That of Ephesians, 5 and 6, we got to start. It tells you how to live in the world as a Christian, and we have to show the gospel to the world. That's why conservatives lose and Christians lose. We don't show it to our society anymore, and they tell us what it is. They tell us what it looks like. They tell us, oh, well, if you're going to pray here, it's going to offend this person over here, so we have to stop it.
Yeah, why wasn't, that bothers me. The whole taking prayer out of school, taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Exactly. Yeah, they started doing that here in California.
I mean, it's just terrible.
Again, mind you, everyone knows I grew up liberal. As far as I look now, and I want people to please, whether it's a law or whether it's policy, I don't believe there's policy, especially in the last 56 years, they've passed or pushed that's actually been beneficial for society. Then I'll double down on that. I believe the leftist ideology is a death cult. And if you look at everything, like, I wasn't able to receive love before because I was believing all that other stuff on the other side. And it wasn't until I got close to God to start accepting love and the existence of it that it was okay for me to receive it, that I was able to hear that even on the throes of disaster, even in the moments of about to lose my job. So as I'm looking on this and they wrap it all in this freedom for women, or freedom for black people, or freedom, or equality or justice, but what policies?
I just realized we haven't talked about the fact, if you're listening at home, Siaka is black.
Yes.
I am white.
Black Irish.
We've not even mentioned that. We've not even brought that up.
That's true.
Because I don't think it is a true division, right? So can you talk about this whole woke thing and critical race theory?
But it was great that you brought up earlier when we were talking before about, a friend of yours who's a black man, all you see is your brother in Christ.
That's right.
All you see. That's what really gets me. It says, God, Jesus said, I came to bring you the good news. You're free. Free of fear. Free of sin. You're free of having to identify as whatever someone else told you to identify in order for you just to move through your neighborhood, in order for you to be loved by another person. You're free. So why do you choose to go back into bondage?
The bondage of being identified by something like race.
It's wild. And all those, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's a sense of equality or equity is the word they use a lot right now, even the trans, all this stuff that they're doing, it's a mixture of the Marxist ideology in order to destabilize us. They need us to be confused and broken. They don't ultimately care about the thing. They don't care about Black Lives Matter movement. They don't care about it, but they care about the ideology breaking the people up. So it's not about, they don't care about the thing. They just use the tool to destroy the people and their connection and then take them for whatever it's worth.
Well, I think you're exactly right about the slavery part of these sorts of ideologies, because the truth of the matter is, let's say as a white person, I think I'm woke, right? We've had this conversation briefly, okay, I'm woke. Yay, I'm woke. That means I am agreeing that there is systemic racism. I'm part of the problem, but I don't want to be, so I admit that I'm part of the problem. But then what's happening is now I'm being accused of cultural appropriation for using the term woke. So no matter what I do,
that's the point.
I'm in prison. I lose.
That is their point.
There's no win.
There is no win. Critical race theory has no win. Wokeism has no win. Equity and inclusion has no win. The only thing it does is keeps people in an isolated mindset of confusion
and victimization.
And that's it.
They identify mostly as victims.
And if you're over there doing that, why would you then step up with a group of your community members and go down to your local politician's office, your city council, and go, yo, y'all not killing babies on our watch? How can you do that when you're worried, well, if I say something, how can I speak? Because I'm not really a black woman of color that really understands, because they said in the bills, the black women of color.
Right. See, it eliminates my ability to speak up about that.
To help. That's ultimately what it's for.
Yeah.
Like, why would you? And I always say this to people. I say this in my speeches as they go. People you always notice on the left they quantify. Well, as a black man, I can't really speak about women's issues. But my thought is, no, I'm your neighbor. We're Americans. We are American family.
And we're humans.
We're humans. Regardless of what anyone wants to say, most people don't move 10 miles outside of where they're born. So whether it's you're next to a black, Asian, whoever, y'all better talk about that neighborhood. Because if there's a criminal or if there's a wild dog on the street, you can't talk about it because you don't own dogs. I can't talk about it because I'm not an Asian person. No, this is our community.
Right.
We live here together. We have to talk.
Right.
So it's something that gets me. We're like, no, stop this. I can't. No, yes, you can. Because are your tax dollars going to be used for it too? Because they don't divvy it out. They don't go, Christian tax dollars don't get put into this for abortion or for all these other programs to start. They take all the money equally, right?
Right.
You can speak equally. I can speak equally. Everyone in this country can. They stop taking our money, then maybe we can talk about compartmentalizing who can speak when and where. But no, you can keep taking my money, I'm done. And as a Christian, you're not going to shut me up about my neighborhood.
Well, and the other thing that this speaks to is just simply the fact that this is where Christianity has a solution. So I've often said on this podcast that the reason I'm a Christian is because I believe it is the best explanation of the way the world really is.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Based on how it's created, all of my experiences, everything I can see, what science shows us, the best explanation of reality is Christianity. And as part of that, but as part of that is then, what is the solution? Well, the solution, as in 12 steps, as it is in Christianity, is personal responsibility. It's always about personal responsibility. You have to
Your
repent.
side of the street.
Yeah, you have to repent of your own sin. You have to take the plank out of your eye to be able to see the log in your brother's eye. You have to look inward and see, Lord, is there any offensive way in me? In me, right? And you start cleaning up yourself.
Yes.
And then out of that awareness of our own sinfulness, our own depravity, our own inability to be perfect, to be righteous, out of that becomes a servant heart to look to our neighbor, to look to others.
I love that. Oh, I love that.
Christianity 101. Folks, at home, if you live in the Los Angeles area,
San Fernando Valley.
See, Lulu's echoing that call.
Yes.
If you are able to, because you live in the right district, I wanted you to meet Siaka so you knew who to vote for State Assembly.
District 43.
District 43.
And I'll tell them the cities are Sylmar, San Fernando Valley, Pacoima, Panorama City, Mission Hills, North Hills, North Hollywood West, and Arleta.
All right. So if you are one of those cities, that means you can vote for Siaka. Please do. If you are not anywhere where you can vote for Siaka, vote.
Yes.
Vote.
Get out
there. Find the right candidates and start voting. We just have to get out there. That's why we did this episode today before we officially launch for season 3. It's just that important. We've got to get involved, be bold, be courageous. So thank you for listening to the Storyteller's Mission with Zena Del Lowe. May you go forth inspired to change the world for the better through story.